remember the times with our 3 children. Unfortunately, to be quite candid, my experience too is I only taught 2 years. My first teaching experience was in Morgan County, Tennessee, in a K-12 environment. I was the only science teacher in the high school environment. So really, that was a great way for me to get introduced to teaching multiple subjects and being in a rural county where there were so many diverse needs in that school and in that county for that matter. We decided, my wife and I decided that we would move back to Putnam County after I had secured that job and spent 2 years there. And she actually got a job before I did. At the time, she was a special ed teacher who specialized in autism and also behavior. So she was hired in Putnam County before I was, having graduated from Putnam County. She was hired there to start a high school program in behavior at Upperman High School, which is in the west side of that county in Baxter. We relocated. I went back without even securing a job. I had promises of a job, but I went back. That's where we thought we needed to be. And with that, I did get a job at Coble High School. 3 weeks into the year, I was asked by the principal of that Upperman High School, 7 through 12 high school, if I would be willing to be an assistant principal for him. So, that was a big transition for me, but I had met him for the first time that summer when my wife was moving into her classroom, and he knew that I had a goal of being a principal and ultimately also being a superintendent, and so he was able, he felt like I could join his team, and so I went straight into that role after 3 weeks of teaching biology and environmental science at Coble High School. And so I changed schools. In September I started, and from there I spent 3 years as assistant principal at that school. There was a change in our school system, and then I spent 5.5 years as principal of that school. And during that time, went from a facility that was old, and it was a 712. We built a new high school, and I transitioned to a new school with the 9th through 12th graders as the principal. And then from that point, after 5.5 years, the superintendent asked me to come and play a district role around strategic planning and innovative programs. His fancy title he assigned was Chief Innovation Officer, whatever that means. But really it means I was interacting with the board and in liaison with community members, and more importantly, the stakeholders within the school system, to ensure that our strategic plan was in the right direction and meeting all the goals that, or at least presenting all the goals that we needed to have to be successful. Ultimately, I was assistant superintendent for teaching and learning. I got back in, well, before that I was technology director for 2 years. I got assigned that role because I was asked to kind of straighten up as far as how operations worked in that team, and how we served teachers better and students better with the use of technology. So the superintendent asked me to do that to kind of provide a better focus about what technology should be in schools, and it's really focused on how does it support student learning. After that point, I was then pulled in to be the assistant superintendent for teaching and learning, which I really was glad to get back into a role of curriculum instruction primarily, in interacting pre-K through 12, not just with our principals, but with our teachers, really supporting the work they do around, improving their instruction in the classroom, providing resources and tools and programs that teachers identified as needs, and implementing those programs. And then after 2 years in that role, our superintendent went to the State Department, and the board appointed me to be the superintendent of Putnam County in 2012, and I was the superintendent until January 2020. And then February 2020, I joined the State Department, and currently I serve as an assistant commissioner on both the academic side, and then another division, I serve as the assistant commissioner for that team on the operations side. On the academic side, we're involved in Reading 360 and implementation of other literacy supports, summer learning programs that legislature has passed, and all the legislation that passed in special session. On the operations side, I work with teams that are supporting our transportation, school safety, school nutrition, coordinated school health, and physical health, which includes our school nurses across the state. So I say all that to say, I certainly am blessed to have the opportunity to re-engage with teachers and to also be in a school system. In this job, I mean, this opportunity, you know, I said job, but educators certainly is a job, but this is a mission. It's a mission for all of you in your classrooms to serve your children. And in a leadership role, whether you are a classroom leader, a school leader, or a district leader, you know, up to the superintendent, you know, it's really a mission. It's much more than a job. And that's what appealed to me. I worked at the State Department, and I certainly admire and respect everyone there, but I know my place is in a school system, where I can be a part of a team that's closest to the work that's important to me, and that's the classroom, and support what happens in those classrooms. So my I guess track record with teachers is one thing that I have done always is try to ensure that the teacher voice is at least, you know, the opportunity for the teacher voice to be heard in planning and decisions is there. One thing I also did was I developed a teacher advisory council, which that's just kind of, you know, that's a normal thing for many superintendents. It was not something that had been done in Putnam County. And so we did develop a teacher advisory council, and the purpose of that council was basically an unfiltered opportunity for the teachers and myself to sit down, and we did a meal. So it was a dinner after school. We did it 4 times a year, and we talked about issues. I also used them as a springboard about future planning, and from a teacher's perspective, what that looks like, or should it look that way. So, you know, I certainly always value, not just because of that teacher voice I hear every day with coming from my wife, but also all the teachers that I've had the privilege of working with. So, I've really been too long-winded. I'd love to turn it over to you with your questions.
Hi, I'm Meredith Redmond. I teach 3rd grade at Ridgeview, and I just wanted to ask you about the funding disparity. So I'm sure you're aware that our county and neighboring districts have there's a disparity between the funding that we receive and that's allocated to us. So how will you work to alleviate and be an advocate for Washington County to receive more equitable funding?
You know, that's a big role of the superintendent. It's actually a team effort. And from listening to classroom teachers, and certainly listening to the principals representing their schools and the needs of their schools, and then from the other end of it, being an agent of the school board, listening to them as they've been elected by the community. So, how would I do it? I can only share how I have done it. You know, being visible, listening. Quite simply, and it may be repetitive, I'll say this again, I'm sure, you know, listen more than you speak. Try to get that input from various stakeholders. Elevate the work that the teachers are doing, that schools are doing, and principals are doing. And most importantly, elevate the work the students are doing. Because, you know, that's because of the teachers. But, you really need to show the community all the great things that teachers are doing, but also the end result about what students do with that, with the support they receive from their teachers. So it's just about keeping the conversation on the forefront, giving a clear plan that has been developed by multiple people, our classroom teachers, our principals, our district staff, and the community of board, and then everyone understanding the goals and the vision and working toward it together. You know, a voice that is unified is amplified, and but you know, it's not a posturing or defensive thing. It's just we're all on the same page. We all are working towards the same goal. And then at the same time, you also build that coalition with your elected officials that are making decisions about funding. And then they also have to get support from the community. And everyone does. I mean, and from what I understand and also know about the reputation of Washington County, not just schools, but the community, I mean, there is a support there. And when you're in it, you may not necessarily feel that. I don't know. I just know in Putnam had the same conversations. But I would travel outside of the state or outside of Putnam County and across the state and outside of the state. If they knew about Putnam County, they knew that people valued education. I hear the same things about Washington County. So you have to make sure people know what they're, you know, that they hear the strengths, you build off of that, and then again, you have a unified conversation. Everyone should be speaking relatively the same lessons. I mean, same message. You know, this is what we need. This is why we need it, and we're going to work together to do it. You're not going to isolate and alienate anybody. It's just here's our goals, and you bring people to the table, and you include them in the conversation. And then when the decision time comes, it doesn't always happen the way you want, but when people are a part of that, conversation, you certainly get the support that helps you be in a position to have that done. So raising funding impacts everyone in the community, and there are a lot of people, as you all know, that don't have children in the schools. So there's always that conversation, but you have to focus on the value that education gives to the community. And whether they're a business person or they're a retired person, they understand the quality of life conversation, and they also understand more times than not about how much value a quality education system gives, and the importance of supporting your children and helping them get to the point when we do have them graduate our high schools, that they're ready to contribute and begin leading the community themselves. So, it's an ongoing conversation. It's not a one-shot thing.
Hey, I'm Dana Green. I teach 2nd grade at Lamar School. Welcome to Washington County. As a former director, how would Putnam County teachers and administrators describe you both professionally and personally?
Great question. I think in both cases, engaged, involved, present. Sometimes, and there was a comment made upstairs, asked me if I'm always that serious. I come across that way, but I mean, you may have a chance to meet my wife, and she will say that's not necessarily true. I think I've always been approachable and also accessible to not just our teachers, but to support staff, certainly to principals and to the leadership team that's there to support the work that happens in the classroom. So I think they would say that I've been visible as a superintendent. I've been in their classrooms. I've seen them teach. There's 850 certified staff in Putnam County. There's 780-ish classroom teachers in various roles of classroom teacher. And I've been in just about every classroom teacher's room. And it wasn't to evaluate them. It was to see the work. And more importantly, I want to see what students are doing. So I think you would at least hear that I'm visible. I did have several teachers, some of our veterans, and I'd been a part of the system for years before being a superintendent, and several of them would stop and take the opportunity to tell me, they had been teaching X number of years, 20, 30 years, and they never had the superintendent in their classroom. And I tried to not just do that one time and check it off. I tried to make that a part of the way I did business. So and it got to the point even that I would be in some schools and in their classrooms, and the teachers knew that I don't want to disrupt your lessons. I don't want to kind of pause the activity. Please keep teaching, and they would keep teaching. And then some of our district staff that weren't in classrooms as much as I was, of course, when they walked in, it was kind of a freeze. What are you doing here? Can help you kind of conversation. So I feel very proud about that. That was what I needed to do. I wanted to be a person that they saw as someone just being a part of their team and want to see their work. So I hope that would be something they would say. Personally, they probably would say I'm very reserved. And then honestly too, when I did leave Putnam County, I made some personal decisions that were very, very terrible. It impacted my marriage. That's why I resigned. I could not lead a school system without taking care of what was most important, and I lost sight of. And so the last year, that's what my wife and I have been doing, strengthening our marriage. In the meantime, though, I felt like I had something to offer at the Department of Education. So I'm sure there might be some comments about that. But I think overall, I think people personally felt like I treated them with respect, that I was sincerely interested in what they had to say and what they did. I valued them, and then I was active in the community, not just the school system as an educator standpoint, but as a community member trying to be a part of the solution.
Thank you.
My name is Janae Peters. I teach 6th grade math at Gray Elementary. My question's a bit two-part.
Okay.
What does an effective and ineffective teacher look like to you?
You know, you could go down the textbook list, but when I walk into a classroom, and it's always about preparation. It's about knowing their students. It's about utilizing the tools that they have to meet the needs of their kids. So when you walk in a classroom and you can just feel it, it's kind of like walking into a school. You can begin to get a sense of how school is by the way you walk in and how it feels. Same thing with a classroom. An ineffective teacher, I think, honestly, doesn't focus enough on their students, if that makes sense. You know, an effective teacher builds relationships with their students so that they can push them and expect more from their students. But they also lay out a very clear pathway for their students. You know, their lessons are structured. They're not perfect, an effective teacher, but they always have a purpose. They always have a beginning. They always have an end. They also, throughout the lesson, an effective teacher, you can see they always are formidably assessing the progress of their students. You know, whether they're in whole group or small group, or they have a chance, the way they work their classroom, they might even have some individual time. So an effective teacher is always evaluating their students' progress through the lesson, through questioning. You know, if we want to do the rubrics, you know, the indicators in the instructional rubric, if we want to walk down. And consequently, I think those are somewhat the minimums of an effective teacher. They're just kind of a good guide, but so formally assessing the needs of their students as they're providing instruction, and then also an effective teacher puts students in a situation where they're a little bit uncomfortable, but they support them and help them gain the confidence to try new things and take risks. I see a lot of teachers that aren't, you know, considered effective, or they may even be considered effective by their value-added score or by their overall summative score. But when you go into the classroom, I mean, they're really not stretching kids like they should. They don't have high expectations. So yes, by the numbers, they may be that above expectation or effective teacher, and that's certainly notable. But you know, a truly effective teacher also builds relationships with their students and also takes opportunities to stretch their students beyond what they believe they can do.
I'm Diana O'Neill from Silver Spring School, and we all know that communication is vital to anything that we do. And in the schools, it's something people have worked in so many ways to develop. But during the pandemic, we realized, wow, that communication is so important. We feel like maybe there's been a little bit of a breakdown in communication with our stakeholders, them understanding what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish through all the different situations, learning circumstances. So we were just wondering, what is the key to establishing and maybe reestablishing and bringing back that communication and connection, not just with our students, but with families and the community itself?
Well, first of all, recognizing the tremendous challenge that our schools across the state have had, our districts and schools have had in dealing with COVID. I mean, you know, and the families certainly too. I mean, it's been community challenges. So what the main problem was, even if you had established protocols around communication in these past year times, there hasn't been a consistency. So you really have to strive to be consistent in the way that you communicate with your families, your parents, your community. There's kind of been a hit or miss sometimes, and sometimes it's the only thing that a district or school could have done. But so everyone appreciates consistency. So to do that, I mean, it's just a matter of being very visible, very transparent about the way that you communicate and how you're going to communicate, and then make sure you do that. I know that's a really broad answer to your question, but again, only thing I can share is my experience. You know, what we tried to do is we used all avenues of communication, but we also established as a team, you know, I guess your norms about communicating with parents and even the broader community. You know, you need to be very direct. You need to always be transparent. You need to keep it simple and short. And then the other thing about communication is, you know, that's one way. You also have to set up opportunities for the two-way communication. That also helps with that disconnect, because you have a chance to kind of come to the middle, so to speak, when you make sure that you're vision of communication includes both sending and receiving, and then acting based on that information you get. So using tools, whether it's a digital tool, some kind of mass calling system, or some kind of survey system, and we all know everybody hates surveys for the most part. They really have a tough time with those because they're annoying to people, but you need that information. But you try to do it in a very respectful and very limited way. So you try to also impress upon everyone this is important, and you do that by your principals leading that, and then your superintendent and your district staff also modeling and leading that kind of same behavior. So that goes to the consistency. I'm sure, the other thing too is you have to be honest, always. If the problem with communication, or maybe even things that have inflamed issues or caused more problems, I mean, you just have to, basically, I use the word all the time, I'll probably say it again, when you make a decision, either as a team or an individual, a leader, and you make a mistake, you have to own it. And so if you've done something and you poorly communicated, you basically start by owning your mistake, and you also then start the process of saying, okay, this is what we're going to do to correct it. But before you do that, you make sure you listen to people about what you should do, and then act in that way. So there's no secret formula. It's really about building trust, being consistent, and then in supporting as a district. One of the main roles of a superintendent and the staff that the superintendent has at the district level is to support the work, not dictate, not push, drive the work, is to support the work. And so I mentioned the word modeling. We have to also provide principals with a framework or some kind of resource that when they have these needs to communicate, this is the best way to do it, and to give them that basically backup. And that's how you create consistency across the school system as well. Now, it's going to look different because the way that a principal and their staff interact with their community is always a little different. But more times than not, that consistency can be valuable across multiple schools. So it's like with teaching. You make sure that people that are going to be communicated have an opportunity to be supported and trained on what effective communication looks like, and then you just continue to be consistent in how you do that. But I end with the most important thing is we're very good in education, and I'm guilty of it. I've been guilty of it. Is the one-way communication. You also have to always account for that two-way process. You have to take feedback, even if you don't like it, and you have to be honest about the feedback, and then you act from there.
Stacey Bledsoe, Asbury Optional High School and Tennessee Virtual School. When considering college and career readiness, how do you feel we can best provide students with early post-secondary opportunities?
Well, I mean, it's somewhat communication. You got to make sure that the students and the parents know what their options are. And you got to support them. Even students that are placed in an alternative setting, probably more important in that situation. And I apologize. I've always been very leery about somebody that comes up and says, this is the way we do things, and I apologize. I'm just trying to communicate my experience. What we did, of course, is you always are aware of what you offer, and you make sure everyone knows that. We were involved with connecting with our business partners and community to make sure that what programs we provided as far as college and career readiness were also aligning to the needs of the region as far as future jobs and employment opportunities. So there's that piece of making sure you're talking to your stakeholders, especially the ones that are saying that we need your students to do X and Y. And then the next thing is you look at your programming. You remove barriers for the existing college and career opportunities or post-secondary opportunities you might have for students, and then you make sure your staff works together to get kids to those opportunities, because sometimes they may not know about them, or there are barriers that we have set up in education that might not be necessary. So we published an annual curriculum guide, which is not that big a deal. It's certainly not innovative, but it wasn't done before in Putnam County. Every school kind of did their own thing, and we highlighted those post-secondary opportunities in Putnam County for all high school students, no matter if they went to any of the 3 high schools. We highlighted those, so it was about communication and making sure the message is there. And then we also provided sessions to where parents can come and learn more about those and why it would benefit them with their student, with their son or daughter. And then the third is we set goals. I mean, before the state required students so many percent or trend where students had to have so many post-secondary opportunities before they graduated. Our team had a goal already before that was even discussed at the State Department. Actually, the work we were doing regionally, and us in that area, in the Upper Cumberland area, and then the Southeast and Chattanooga area, we actually, I think, were involved in the discussion about should this be a requirement. So we made it a priority. That's what I'm trying to say in too many words. And we communicated why it was important, and also how students can access those opportunities. And then again, why should they?
I'm Candy Wright from Boones Creek Elementary School, 3rd grade. Why do you wish to be the director of Washington County Schools, and what is your vision for our system?
Great question, of course. And that's a fair question about why I'd wish. I know there's always a concern, and even I had them in hiring people. How long are they going to be here? Are we going to waste all these resources, time and effort, and are they going to come and then they're going to leave soon? Are they looking for the next big thing? As my wife and I started getting to the point that we knew Nashville was not a permanent place for us. We enjoyed it. We lived downtown. We enjoy it. But we knew it wasn't, and it certainly wasn't aligned to our goals as educators and also, as a married couple. So when Washington County came on the radar, having known some of the history as far as I was familiar as a superintendent, the successes in this region in Washington County, of course, Kingsport City, Bristol City, Sullivan County. I've worked closely with all those superintendents on several things. So that was my awareness anyway. But before that, there's always been a reputation of a priority and value of education in Washington County. It's much like Putnam in the sense of you have a university, you have a strong presence of businesses in the region that when kids graduate, they can access jobs and they can stay home. So, you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And having had the experience in Putnam, I also looked at things that were correlated, similar, that I thought, with my experience and skills, I think I can be a part of the team and be a valuable member of the team. And honestly, my year at the Department of Education, I've learned a lot. I respect those people I work with immensely, but it's not the work that I want to do. My work, my passion is closer to the classroom. And I think because of my experience, and I think because of all the things that I see that are similar, at least match up to my experience with Washington County and the needs I see, I think I can be a part of that success. As far as vision, the vision always starts with students. What do we need our students to do? What do our students need to reach those goals? So, I'm not going to stand up here and proclaim a vision without talking to the stakeholders, teachers, school administrators, community members, especially board members who really set the direction that we need to go as far as, they know the pulse of the community and what we're trying to do. So, but I can say, going back to my experience also, I think when that is decided based on input from everyone as far as clarifying the vision, I do have experience on, once we clarify the vision, how you keep people focused on the vision. And sometimes it's as simple as something as simple as I may mention at some point, it may be 3 action words that everybody knows, they understand what it means, and that's what we do in our school system to serve kids. And it's not that simple, but it starts that way. Everybody gets on the same page. Everybody may not agree with everything that is done, but they understand why we're doing it. That's important. So the vision would need to include the voice of several people in this room, not in this room, that are vested in the success of students and this community. And I want to be a part of creating that vision and then executing that vision.
Thank you. Is there time?
Got that extra 30 seconds?
Okay, good. She said you could have one more question.
Just kidding.
Do you have any innovative ideas that you're bringing with you?
You know, that question was asked this morning, and I'm not going to be presumptuous in spouting off what innovative ideas. You know, I've really, even though I had that title at one point, I was the Chief Innovation Officer. Innovation is really about improvement and about not being complacent and understanding that you may be good at what you do, but kids deserve great. And what are we doing now that we can do better, and then what are we not doing that we need to do? That's innovation. It's continually improving. I mean, it may be doing things in brand new ways. It may be just recreating or strengthening how you do it. So some of the things that I would probably want to make sure that I brought from my experience is building leaders. That's not necessarily innovative, but maybe in the way that you do it in a very intentional way could be. You know, I can talk about the technology integration that we did in Putnam County that I certainly feel comfortable with team support leading and introducing. You know, we didn't just focus on buying boxes and wires and laptops and putting them in front of kids. We focused on how are kids going to use them, and teachers, what do you need, what skills do you need to utilize them so that you can personalize the learning for every student in the school system. So we went on a journey about how you do personalized learning in Putnam County. We began with the middle school, and once our middle school teachers really led the work, those teachers then went down to the elementary school and then were the seed to support the elementary teachers. And how do you do a personalized learning environment in brick and mortar, which I believe also really supported Putnam County as they transitioned to a full remote setting when they had to when COVID was really hitting in the spring. So the innovation is technology is important because that's the world we live in, but what's more important is can you use it and how do you do that? That would be a simple innovation.
All right, thank you, educators. That's all the time we have for today. Hope you got good answers to your questions.